Hello, this is Spartan Commander, and this is the 271st Rome Total War Brotherhood game that I've put onto YouTube. As you know, the last 3 battles were fought 2 to 3 years ago. Well, this battle was only fought 2 to 3 weeks ago, and was fought on the Germanic Forest map. This is an interesting battle, and I think as you see the armies of both teams, I think you'll see that it is it's a very interesting battle. And what actually happened was, as we were doing the setup, I noticed that one of the enemy team members chose Parthia. So I then said, okay, if you want to bring Parthia, bearing in mind that the strength of Parthia is its cavalry, we would have a no cavalry max. So in this game, it's still 2 horse archers max, 6 chariots max, but there is no cavalry max in this game, and you'll see that there are several different type armies in this game here, due to that no cavalry max. Okay, our first teammate is Brotherhood member Cal, who has bought the Rome Scipio faction. And if you notice here, Cal's bought 16 infantry and only 4 cavalry. Now that might be because of the armies that we're facing. When you see the enemy armies, you might see why he's bought that army there. Our next teammate is an RTW player who's called himself Mike, but is in fact Scorpion King SR, and he has bought the Egyptian faction. Now you might find it unusual to bring the Egyptian faction to a winter map, but that's what Scorpion King's done. And as you can see there, he's got I think it's 6 Pharaoh guards there, good upgrades. I see it's an experienced stripe, gold shield, gold attack. These are the elite infantry of Egypt. Now we move on to the Pharaoh bowmen. Now these bowmen are probably pound for pound the best archers in the game, and I notice he's given them 7 upgrades. That's experienced stripe, gold shield, gold attack. Now these archers are so tough you can use them as light infantry when they run out of arrows. They've got a really long distance that their arrows travel, so they can kill a lot of enemy from a long distance, and as I say, probably the best archers in the game. And then we've got the Egyptian chariots. Now these chariots here, they've got good specifications. One thing about them, they don't run amok. So when they get killed, they just leave the battlefield like any other unit. Remember, we've seen chariots run amok before that kill both friend and foe alike. Well, these Egyptian chariots don't do that. As I say, when they get killed, they kind of just leave the battlefield as any other unit. And then I see he's got one chariot archer unit here. These are fast moving, and when you put them into a Canterbury circle, they can do a lot of damage to the enemy. And I see he's guarded that chariot archer unit with desert cavalry. Now remember, those desert cavalry axes are effective against armor. Yes, they're only light cavalry, but the effective against armor axes can make a difference. So I think that's for a 31k battle, I think that's a pretty balanced Egyptian army there, and I bet the enemy thought they were going to get all Pharaoh archers. Okay, and now we go move on to our third teammate, Brotherhood member Steve Longshanks, who's bought the Seleucid faction. Unusual for Steve, and if you notice, he's got the Seleucid archers there. Unfortunately, the Seleucid archers are all short range, but if you count up there, I think he's got 13 cavalry units. Now this is an experimental army for Steve. I haven't seen him bring this before. And if you notice, he's got a mixture of heavy companion cavalry, or the winged horsemen, as we sometimes call them, because of the kind of wings on their helmets. So he's got a mixture of the, as I say, those cavalry, and the infamous cataphract cavalry as well. As you know, what we call them, the tanks of the ancient world. If you notice that the cataphracts cavalry there, as I say, are armoured from head to toe, so that's why we sometimes call them the tanks of the armoured world with all that armour. If you look at the upgrades on the companion cavalry, you'll see that they've got, I think it's 8 upgrades. So that's 2 experienced stripes, gold shield, gold attack. So that makes these elite cavalry even better. And then his cataphract cavalry, he's got 7 upgrades. So that's an experienced stripe, gold shield, gold attack. So those cavalry are really tough, and this army, make no mistake, is built for attack. No defense, no pulling back or anything like that. That army is built for attack. Now we move on to our fourth teammate, which is myself, Spartan Commander, who has bought a very old Scythian army here. This army is the army that I used to bring back in the early days of Rome Total War, before there was any cavalry max or anything like that. And every now and again, if I get a chance, I like to dust it off, clean it up, and bring it onto the modern day battlefield. As you can see there, I've got about, I think it's something like 14 maidens, headhunting maidens, and the general, cavalry general there. Let's look at the army a little bit more in depth. As you can see, I've got chosen archers, 4 chosen archers there. These guys have got good range and are tough archers. And as I say, then we move on to the headhunting maidens. Now they're only light cavalry, but those axes are effective against armour. And I think pound for pound, cavalry versus cavalry, I reckon these headhunting maidens are probably the best cavalry in the game at cavalry versus cavalry. They are only light cavalry, but with those effective against armour axes, they are really good. If you notice, I've split my my maiden army into 2. I've got one army with 7 maidens in, and the other army with 6 maidens and a cavalry general. So I can either use those 2 armies in a combination attack, or I can use them on different parts of the battlefield, depending on the circumstances of the particular battle. So as I say, this army is extremely old, maybe 12 years old. And as I say, if I get a chance to bring it onto the modern day battlefield, I like to, just to see how well it does on today's battlefield. So there's our army there, lots of different factions, but you wait till you see the other team. It's got potential to be a great game. And here is the other team. We have RTW player Turk. He's called himself IOW the Great Turk. I think he might be in the IOW clan, and he has bought the Greek cities faction there. If you notice, I think he's got something like about 14 Spartan units. So you know how tough they are with their 2 hit points and their really great specifications. And then unusually, I see he's bought 3 units of militia cavalry. Now these are javelin throwing cavalry, very fast moving, and they can be a nuisance to enemy troops there. They can cause a lot of casualties, especially shooting into the rear and the flank of enemy troops. So that's a good Greek cities army. Their next teammate is RTW player Lee, who has bought the Rome Julio faction. Now he hasn't got a lot of infantry, but if we look closely, can you see that each infantry unit has got 7 upgrades? So that's an experienced stripe, gold shield, gold attack. So I think he might only have maybe 9 infantry, but they've got very good upgrades on. But unusually, if you notice, he's got 6 archer units. I think it's 6 archer units. Now the reason he's got those archer units is because I think that team thought that Scorpion King was going to bring all Pharaoh archers, basically. So what they've done is, I think they've bought a lot of archers to try and counter that threat. I see he's got an old school Roman armoured general there as his general. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think got 7 upgrades. So that's an experienced stripe, gold shield, gold attack. Fast moving. Should be interesting to see how well that does. And I see he's got 4 Praetorian cavalry there as well. So I think that's a custom built army, bearing in mind they feel that they're going to face a lot of Pharaoh archers. Okay, now the next army is bought by a player called Triple X, who I think is Thor, but I'm not really sure, but it's called himself Triple X, and he's bought the Parthia faction. Now how often do you see the Parthia faction bought to the 31k battlefield? Now bearing in mind that I did say no cavalry max, I see he's only still bought 6 cavalry. Okay, so he's got his archers there. Of course, Parthia archers are very short range. And then we move on to the Eastern Infantry. Now, if you notice, the Eastern Infantry's got 2 stripes, gold shield, gold attack. Really well upgraded. Now, we used to call them years ago the Pajama Wearers. We nicknamed them the Pajama Wearers because to a lot of us it looked like they were wearing pyjamas. But this Eastern Infantry is a bit naff, really, and it doesn't matter how many upgrades you put on them. They never seem to do very good on the 31k battlefield from years ago when people used to bring them. So let's have a look at his cavalry units. I see he's got the armoured Eastern General units, and if you notice, he's got 8 upgrades. So that's 2 experienced stripes, gold shield, gold attack, and they've each got 2 hit points. These general units, so they're extremely tough. Their general specifications are very good as well. So it'd be interesting to see how well they do. And I see he's got 2 cataphract units as well, I think with 8 upgrades on. So once again, 2 experienced stripes, gold shield, gold attack. Remember these cataphracts, like we said, for the Seleucid army are the tanks of the ancient world. So it'll be interesting to see how well they do in combination with those armoured general units. So there you go, that's the Parthia army, 31k Parthia army there. It'll be interesting to see how well it does during the course of the battle. And their 4th teammate is a player that's called himself Bob the Magnificent, Chimera Bob the Magnificent, but I think it is Bubo, and he has bought the Dacian faction. Now, how often do you see the Dacia faction brought to the 31k battlefield? Very, very rarely. And of course, with being a barbarian faction, it's got the woods bonus and the winter bonus. So there's the enemy team. Looks like a great team. Okay, at this stage of the battle, I thought I'd show you, we didn't have a close look at the Dacian army because all the units were hidden in the woods. But there's the whole enemy team there, lined up with their armies. But if you notice that the Dacian generals bought 18 units of chosen archers and 2 cavalry units. Now this goes to show that they really believed they were going to be facing loads of Egyptian pharaoh archers, and that's why he bought so many archers, 18 archers there, because they were going to counter what they thought was possibly maybe 18 pharaoh archers. So this team, believe it or not now, if you total up all their archers, they've got 28 archer units. 28 archer units. So we're going to have to be careful here, because both Steve and myself are like cavalry based, and of course our cavalry will suffer big casualties from archer fire. So we're going to have to play this game extremely tactically to make sure we're not going to be shot to pieces by that many archers. As I say, this should be a great, interesting battle for you to watch, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, at this very early stage of the battle here, you can see that Scorpion King is taking some of his pharaoh archers out to our left flank here to target the enemy team. But if you notice, there's a couple of fast moving Parthian armored general units moving towards those archers. So I'm not sure whether Scorpion King will spot that or not. But as you can see, there's one of those units going for his archers, and one unit to try and take on those Egyptian cavalry there. You notice I moved the maidens forward to help out with the that armored general unit that's attacking the pharaoh archers there. Right, okay. At this stage of the battle, I'm going to pause the game, because what's actually happened here is Scorpion King has just lost contact with the game. He's dropped. Now, sometimes if you wait long enough, a person that's dropped sometimes can come back into the game, but we'd waited for ages and Scorpion King had dropped, and in the end, because he'd locked the game up, I had to kick him from the game, unfortunately. So now we're down to an AI ally with the Egyptian faction, and Cal, Steve and myself. So straight away I thought, well, shall I terminate the game and you know, let's rehost and try and get 8 human players instead of 7 human players and the AI. But I looked around at a lot of the players on here have bought different type experimental armies, and I thought, well, you know, instead of terminating, let's carry on with the game. We'll try and give as good game as we can, but as you know, those of you that's played with an AI ally, it's usually not very good. So so basically it's Cal, Steve, myself and an AI ally versus 4 very good players. As I say, I didn't terminate the game because I think as people have bought different armies and things like that, let's try and make a game of it, and we'll see what we can do. The thing is, with the enemy having 28 archers, we're going to have to play this game extremely tactically, because with the volume of arrows that's going to be coming in on us, my guess is that the AI will just advance his pikemen forward like they usually do, and those pikemen will be shot to pieces. Steve and myself, as I said, we got cavalry there, so against the volume of archers there, we're very susceptible to archer casualties. And even Cal with his Roman army there, if he just stands still facing them, he'll suffer minimum casualties. But if he moves, 28 archer units shooting at him, he will suffer catastrophic casualties in his forward units. So, as I say, we're going to have to play this game extremely tactically and strategically, especially with an AI ally against 28 good archer units. As I say, this should be an interesting and unusual battle for you to watch. But as I say, remember that Egypt now is the AI. It's no longer commanded by a human player, so it'll be interesting to see how well the AI play there. If you notice that Steve Longshank's taken his short range archers forward to engage some of those Dacia archers there. The Dacia chosen archers got long range, so sometimes it's worthwhile keeping those back and taking advantage of the long range to shoot the short range archers before they can get the long range archers into range. So say the enemy team have formed up pretty close, pretty tight there, You can see the AI there charging, looks like a light cavalry unit out towards some archers there. Nice little move there by the AI. If you notice now, can you see that Cal's starting to move over to the left there? He's starting to look left tank. I think he's looked at the enemy team, he's looked at the archers, he knows we can't hang around here. Both Steve's army and my army are both built for attack. So there's no good hanging around, no good trying to be defensive, letting them move their archers round to advantageous positions where they can shoot us in the flank or the rear, or every time we move we suffer big casualties. We're going to have to attack. We're going to have to grab the initiative here. And you've noticed that Steve is leading the way there with his Seleucid army. Let's just pause the game for a second there. Let's say here, if you look over on the left flank, our left flanker, the enemy in front of us are mostly archers. Can you see they're mostly archers and a couple of cavalry units there? So if we attack that flank there, we should be able to smash that flank. Now their main infantry, if you notice, is over on the right of our flank there, over on the right flank there as we're looking at them. So if we can charge in into this left flank here, as I say, it's just archers and a couple of cavalry units there, so we could smash through that left flank. If you notice that Steve, as I say, he's grabbed the initiative. He always works well with Cal, as we've seen in other battle videos. If you know, Cal's backing him up there with his infantry. But as I say, Steve's grabbed the initiative there and charges cavalry forward, taking out the enemy archers. And as you can see, Cal's following him with his infantry. And the Greek city's general here is probably wanting to, like we said in other battles, would like to take our ally on, our Rome ally on, head on with those pikes. Let's just pause the game for a second to take stock of exactly what's happening. As I say, Steve's moving his Seleucid cavalry, heavy cavalry around the flanks there. As you can see here, the AI is moving units kind of over to the flank a little bit there. I've got my chosen archers shooting at the enemy, and I've got my my light cavalry, my maidens, back at the moment. I'm just surveying the situation to see where the best place to use them are. But as you can see, the enemy Greek cities general here, he would like to attack our Rome ally head on with his Greek cities, as we've seen in other battle videos. So Cal's, my guess, is throwing loads of pilers into those Greek city units as he stands at the moment. But as we're pinning those Greek city units around now, can you see Steve can start moving his cavalry all over the battlefield there. If you notice, the Greek city's general has seen the danger and has started to move his Spartan units over. Remember, those Spartans have got anti-cavalry bonus, big anti-cavalry bonus, so we need to keep our cavalry away from those Greek city units. Let's pause the game for a second. As I say here, the Greek city's general's attacking with about half, maybe 3/4 of his army into our Scipii ally, but he's had to move units out to counter the cavalry. Okay, and the Parthian army is still stood there, it hasn't kind of moved too much, and the Julia army is moving over as well. A lot of Dacian archers still shooting into us. As you can see here, I've got my my maiden army at the back, still surveying what's happening here. You can see a couple of cataphract units attacking the archers there. But as I say, our main thrust of the attack was on this left flank here with Steve's cavalry and Cal's infantry there. Let's say we got a lot of archers shooting. I noticed that the Pharaoh archers are firing all the time into the enemy ranks, probably causing a lot of casualties. You notice Steve's cavalry is an absolute menace to the enemy there, routing loads of archer units, making them kind of, because he's attacking, look, can you see how he's keeping the enemy on the back foot? Remember what we've talked about this before. If you attack aggressively, the enemy's kind of got to dance to your tune, they've got to react to you. And with Steve being so aggressive with that cavalry at the back, do you see how they've had to move units to the rear to try and counter his cavalry? Nice attacking move there, boys. I say we had to grab the initiative. We couldn't hang around facing 28 archer units. So we've attacked there. As I say, Steve moving his cavalry around the back there, being an absolute menace and nuisance, disrupting the enemy battle line, which is what he wanted to do, causing a lot of casualties to the enemy there, routing a lot of their archers, taking away the power of all those archer units they had there by routing them. You can see I'm bringing some of my maiden units into the fray now. Let's say I've only got light cavalry, so I've got to be careful where I put them. If you notice, the Parthia army is still stood there at the moment in formation, but the Greek city's general is still attacking our Scipii ally there. Let's see what happens next. Right, if you notice there, now can you see I've taken one of my maiden armies over to the right flank with my general in there, taking out archer units. So once again, they had 28 archer units to start off with, but the way that Steve's cavalry and mine are doing here, we're routing a lot of their archer units there. So taking away the strength of all those archers they've had there by simply killing and routing those units. As you can see, Lee's moving his Julii army about as much as he can. He knows that the Seleucid heavy cavalry there is a real menace. So, you know, by Steve and myself being so aggressive with our cavalry, we are kind of disrupting the enemy's battle formation here. There's some Parthian cataphracts there, or as a general unit there fighting. Steve outnumbers those two units, so they'll rout pretty soon. If you notice that the Parthian infantry has not moved around a lot. And as I say, Lee's moving his Julii army around as much as he can to try and cover as much of the battle. Let's just pause the game for a second, just to show you. Can you see the Greek city's general here? He would have loved to attack our Scipii ally head on, but instead of that, he's formed a defensive circle because he's had to send off maybe half his army to try and defend against the cavalry attacks. So he's formed up a defensive circle there, simply because he's just had to send off several units to fight the cavalry. There, so that's good for us because he's not attacking our Scipii ally head on as he'd like to do. As you can see, a lot of the Julii infantry and cavalry are moving around there, trying to counter our cavalry attacks at the rear. But if you notice, the Parthian army is still stood in formation there, so it'd be interesting to see what that does when it actually gets moving. Let's say Lee is trying to use his army the best he can with his Greek city's ally there at the back to try and counter our cavalry attacks. There's still a lot of archers left for the enemy there, but we have really carved up their archers with our cavalry attack. Let's say with headhunting maidens, they are really good cavalry, but they are only light cavalry. I don't really want to get them involved with elite infantry units. So I'm picking my targets extremely carefully with what I'm hitting here. And I definitely want to keep them away from those anti-cavalry Spartan pike units as well, as much as I can. Steve's cavalry being heavy and well upgraded though, I think he can hit a little bit harder than I can and cause a lot more damage. You notice here, Cal and myself are charging our cavalry into that Julii infantry. Remember that Julii infantry though, well upgraded, experienced stripe gold shield, gold attack. So I don't expect us to do a lot of damage to that those units there. Right, if you notice here, can you see that Parthia army has moved forward, engaging a couple of Egypt units, but can you see Steve's and my maiden army coming in behind those Parthia units, and bang as that cavalry hits. And can you see those 120-man Parthia infantry units with 2 stripes, gold shield, gold attack, have just basically all been routed by Steve and my cavalry there. We just routed that entire Parthia infantry there. Let's just pause the game for a second. So as he said, no matter what upgrades you seem to put on that Eastern infantry, they just don't seem to be able to do very good on the 31k battlefield. As you can see now, basically the whole Parthian army has been routed there. And all that infantry has just been routed by Steve's and my cavalry. If you notice, as I say, their allies now are the Greek cities and the Julii units there, trying to do the best they can. But as I say, it was Steve and myself being so aggressive with our cavalry, trying to disrupt their battle line, keeping them running all over the place to try and counter our cavalry. There's a close-up of the maidens there and the Seleucid cavalry there, routing those Parthian pajama-wearing infantry, if you like. So we haven't done too bad there. But bearing in mind we've got an AI ally, we haven't done too. I don't think we've done too bad. If you don't mind me saying there. As I say, we're still facing good quality Julii infantry and of course those elite Spartan units. Cal's done very well with his infantry, nice tactical move of infantry units and cavalry as well. As I say, we're taking out I think the remainder of the enemy archer units there. If you notice, there were some pike units moving towards my cavalry, so I pulled them out as soon as I could. Like I say, with light cavalry, you definitely don't want to get involved with any pike units. Right, can you see Steve charging head on into those Greek city Spartan units there with those Seleucid cavalry, and bang as that cavalry hits. Nice hit there. I shouldn't imagine Steve hang around too long though. He probably just wanted to get in there, cause some casualties, shock them a bit and then pull back, which is what he's just done. He got the full cavalry charge bonus, pull back. Now if I'd have done that with my light cavalry, I'd have probably lost most of the cavalry that I charged in there, but it just goes to show how tough the Seleucid cavalry are with good upgrades. Right, if you notice here, the Greek city's army that was facing our Scipioid ally is under a lot of pressure. We've still got our archers shooting into those Spartan units from the flank. If you notice that Steve still got some of his cavalry, that very battle-damaged cavalry, but it wouldn't surprise me if he charged them into those engaged Greek cities. There you go. You can charge them into those engaged Greek city units. Wouldn't surprise me if he routed them. There you go. Lots of the Greek city units starting to rout. Nice hit there by Steve. If you notice, I'm charging my cavalry in at the top there from behind the Julii infantry, and I'm charging some in from the front as well. Managed to kill the Julii general there. So of course their morale will drop even though they've got good upgrades. So you see there's still some enemy Julii, good upgraded enemy Julii units left, and some Greek city units left. But Cal did extremely well with his infantry, moved them around extremely well. They're tactically getting in behind them, getting to the flank. We just managed to kill the Dacian general as well there. So as you notice now, can you see we're starting to encircle what's left of the enemy Julii and Greek cities units there. Now my guess is those units are battle damaged. Their morale is very low. If we can hit them with a cavalry hit, then I think we'd probably be able to rout them. And just to say, some RTW players have been saying to me, as they charge their cavalry in, they're saying to themselves, bang, as the cavalry goes in. So just like to apologise for any of you that are doing that. It's just that when the cavalry hits, I kind of think that's just the right thing to say, bang, as it goes in. As you can see here, we're just charging our cavalry in, and the shock and casualties that our cavalry has caused there has routed the last of those enemy units there. So bearing in mind that we had an AI ally in this battle, and Steve and myself were basically all cavalry with just a few foot archers, and Cal's infantry there. I don't think our team did too badly there, by and large. As I say, when we were facing 28 archer units, we just couldn't stand around being defensive because they would have shot us to pieces. We had to grab the initiative. And it was nice to see Steve and Cal attacking on that left flank. Let's just pause the game for a second. Now, if you saw those Parthian infantry all routed, can you see all those Parthian dead there? That was a nice hit for us. We did hit them in the rear. But they were 120-man units, and they were extremely well upgraded. But as you can see, Parthian infantry, no matter what upgrades you put on them, they just don't seem to do very good on the 31k battlefield. So, so basically, that, as I say, if you'd bought all a lot more cavalry units, that might have made a difference in the battle there. But as you can see there, I think we're just mopping up the last of the enemy units there. Let's say this was fought on the Germanic forest map. Remember that barbarians like Dacia and Seleucid, they get the snow bonus, and if they fight in the woods, they get the woods bonus as well. Okay, first thing I'd like to say is really well played to everybody in the game there. As you can see, amazingly, that was a clear victory to us, bearing in mind we had an AI ally. But I'd just like to draw your attention, if you look at the AI ally's kills, you can see he's got the highest kills in the game. So I bet there's a lot of RTW veterans looking at that thinking, oh my gosh, how did the AI get the highest kills? But there you go, 1,748 kills for our Egypt AI ally. And just like to say, really well played to Turk Lee Triple X, who I think was Thor. If you know, Triple X had the biggest army in the game, but unfortunately had the lowest kills there. So unfortunately, I think it was all that infantry. If you notice, my headhunting maidens had quite good kills. Really, I had the smallest army on the battlefield, but didn't do too badly for kills there. So I'd just like to say, really well played to Turk Lee Triple X and Chimera Bob, who I think was Bubo. Really well played, guys. An interesting, unusual battle, and really well played to Steve, AI, and Cal. I thought you guys played really well as well. I hope you enjoyed the battle. This is Spartan Commander saying bye for now.